2.3 million people are trapped in Gaza, with a war raging around them and barriers and a sea hemming them in. So when Israel orders Gaza's people to move to a safer area, where can they go? The UN says nearly 85% of Gaza's population has been forced to leave their homes since the start of the Israel-Gaza War. That's 1.9 million people. As Israel retaliated to the October 7 Hamas terrorist attacks by bombing Gaza, it told residents to head south for their safety. But as Israel's offensive expands, people are running out of places to go. Let's take a step back. This war began when Hamas launched a surprise terrorist attack on Israel on October 7. Hamas is the militant group that's controlled the Gaza Strip since 2007 and is deemed a terrorist organisation by the US, the UK, Australia and others. It said its attack was in response to all the atrocities Palestinians have faced over decades. Its fighters bulldozed parts of the border barrier. Then they went on a deadly rampage through civilian neighbourhoods, killing more than 1,200 people and taking around 240 hostage. Retaliation from Israel was swift.
Citizens of Israel, we are at war.
Israel launched the most intense bombing campaign into Gaza in the 75-year history of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, with the goal of eliminating Hamas. And the two sides have been in combat since. Caught in the middle, though, are Gaza's people. The Gaza Strip is one of the most densely populated areas on Earth. On average, there's more than 6,500 people per square kilometre. That's about the same as Hong Kong. Australia's density, by the way, is 3.5 people per square kilometre. Israel's barrier is to the north and east, the border with Egypt is to the south, and the Mediterranean Sea is to the west. Israel controls the supply of food, water, fuel, electricity, telecommunications, the internet, and the movement of people through two main border crossings. The Egyptian border to the south has one border crossing, but Egypt and Israel determine who comes and goes. So, unlike other global refugee crises, evacuating large volumes of civilians to a safe place is an unprecedented challenge. Now, a week into this conflict, as the Israeli military was about to begin ground attacks, it dropped thousands of leaflets ordering more than 1 million civilians living in the northern half of the territory to evacuate within 24 hours. Israel's evacuation order included the biggest metropolitan area, Gaza City, home to about 700,000 people. But everyone north of Wadi Gaza was told to move. People began moving in the direction of Gaza's 8 UN refugee camps, created following the 1948 Arab-Israeli War. More on that soon. The camps already housed more than 620,000 people, almost a quarter of Gaza's population. Most of the new refugees chose to head south. In cars if there was fuel, by donkey cart if they could find one, or by foot for 7 hours.
I came from the north. There is nothing left in the north.
These satellite images from southern Gaza show a massive crowd along an evacuation corridor on November 17th. The south's biggest city, Khan Yunis, normally home to 400,000 people, ballooned to more than 1 million overnight. People began seeking refuge in the existing camps, new UN shelters, schools and hospitals. But there's been severe overcrowding and poor sanitary conditions. The health system's all but collapsed, there's little clean water, and people are at risk of starving.
People are really desperate. There's fear in the children's eyes. They don't know where to go. They have nowhere to stay.
We have to find solutions to this. We can't turn away from what is evidently a moral failure in the face of the international community.
The UN's humanitarian agency says nearly 1.2 million displaced people are registered in 151 of its facilities across Gaza, and about 1 million of these people are registered at 94 shelters in the south. Another 191,000 are thought to be staying at 124 schools, hospitals, offices, wedding venues and community centres. The rest are believed to be staying with families they know or out in the open. A week-long ceasefire that involved the release of Israeli and foreign hostages in exchange for Palestinian prisoners ended on December 1st after Hamas fired a rocket into Israel and Israel resumed bombing in return. Israel also announced it was expanding its campaign to eliminate Hamas by targeting the south, because it believed top Hamas leaders were hiding amongst the displaced.
Having chosen to hold on to our women, Hamas will now take the mother of all thumpings.
Khan Yunis, an area previously marked as safe, was no longer. The million people who'd moved there were now back in danger.
Determine a safe place for us and we will settle there. As civilians, we are not to blame.
Israel says it does everything it can to minimise harm to civilians during its military operations. After the ceasefire ended, it introduced a new system for warning civilians about areas to be targeted by issuing a detailed map, with the Gaza Strip divided into more than 600 zones on a grid. The map was to be accessed through a QR code on leaflets dropped by military jets, social media posts, or the Israeli Defence Force website. Trouble is, the mobile phone networks are overcrowded and there's little electricity to charge phones. Even with battery, the internet collapses every day. There have also been reports of discrepancies, with some areas marked safe on some maps and not safe on others. CEO of Medical Aid for Palestinians, Melanie Ward, posted on social media, "I cannot overstate the fear, panic and confusion that these Israeli maps are causing civilians in Gaza, including my own staff."
There are no safe places in Gaza. We have seen since the beginning of this conflict that those places that fly the UN flag are not safe.
I reject the comment that there aren't safer places in the Gaza Strip, precisely because we have specifically designated these places. The maps are there. People can see where they are and where people can go to. And once again, we've shared them with the humanitarian organizations as precisely so they can beef up their effort to deal with the civilians who will relocate to these safer areas.
Since the end of the ceasefire, tens of thousands of displaced people have fled from Khan Yunis as far south as they can go to Rafah on the border with Egypt. For many, this is the second or third time they've been forced to move on since this conflict began.
This is our last place. Where else will we go after this?
The UN Secretary-General noted that the people of Gaza are being told to move like human pinballs, ricocheting between ever smaller slivers of the south without any of the basics for survival.
From day one, they told us to go from one place to the other, and then another. Who knows where next?
So where do Gaza's 1.9 million displaced people go from here? Well, that depends a lot on how long the war lasts. Even if the fighting stops and Gaza's people are allowed home, there's little to go back to. Satellite images show an estimated 60% of buildings have been destroyed so far.
There is no safety at all. We are now next to the Egyptian border, escaping bombing and death. This is the last place before Egypt.
Now, both Egypt and Jordan have been vocal in their support for the people of Gaza, but they've made one thing clear.
No refugees in Jordan, no refugees in Egypt.
That's because Egypt and Jordan have seen this all before. In 1948, during the Arab-Israeli War, in what Palestinians call the Nakba, or catastrophe, more than 700,000 Palestinians were displaced. These refugees settled in Gaza, the West Bank, as well as Syria, Jordan and Egypt. Many of the people and their descendants remain stateless. In 1967, when Israel seized the West Bank from Jordan, the Golan Heights from Syria, Sinai and Gaza from Egypt, 300,000 more Palestinians fled, mostly into Jordan. For many of these refugees, it was the second time they were displaced. Today, both Egypt and Jordan already have sizable refugee populations. According to the UNHCR, Egypt hosts around 430,000 refugees and asylum seekers from 59 countries, mostly from Sudan, Syria and South Sudan. Jordan has the second largest number of refugees per capita worldwide. More than 760,000 people are registered with the UNHCR, with close to 90% of them from Syria. Gaza's displaced people fear history could repeat itself. A leaked wartime concept document from the Israeli Intelligence Ministry recommends resettling Palestinians from Gaza into tent cities in Egypt's northern Sinai Peninsula.
The whole concept of transferring Palestinians from the Gaza Strip into Sinai is simply moving the fighting and resistance from the Gaza Strip to Sinai, which means Sinai will become a base for military operations against Israel. And then Israel will try to defend itself and direct its military operations against Egypt and Sinai.
Both Egypt and Jordan are saying that Israel is forcing the displacement of Palestinians.
The unequivocal rejection of the forced displacement or internal displacement of the Palestinians. This is a war crime according to international law and a red line for all of us.
These are, of course, outrageous and false accusations. Israel is fighting to defend itself from the monsters who perpetrated the October 7th massacre, and the purpose of our campaign is to bring those monsters to justice and ensure that they can never again hurt our people. We are urging civilians to get out of harm's way to the designated safe zone.
Qatar, which has played a key mediating role in this conflict, says efforts to stop the war and have Hamas release all hostages will continue. But a willingness from both sides to discuss a ceasefire is fading. For Gaza's people, time and options are running out.